Usually when we talk about humanity, there is this fundamental underlying assumption that we all bring to the table.
Right, something we don't even think about.
Exactly. It's an expectation of a binary. Like, you look at a crowd of people, and almost automatically, entirely unconsciously, your brain categorizes them.
Male, female.
Man, woman.
Yeah. It is the absolute bedrock of how we structure our societies, our families, our languages, and, well, our very identities.
It really is the lens through which we view practically all of human history.
Right. And trying to imagine a world without that binary feels almost physically disorienting.
Oh, absolutely.
It is like trying to imagine a world without gravity. You take it away and you just float, entirely untethered from everything you thought made you human.
And that disorientation is precisely the point of a truly great thought experiment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it forces you to strip away everything you assumed was a hard-coded rule of human nature. And it challenges you to see what is left underneath.
Which is usually a lot of scaffolding. Exactly. When you remove that gravity, you start to realize how much of our world is built simply to handle the weight of it.
Which brings us to a landscape that is completely alien yet somehow hauntingly familiar.
So true.
We want you, the listener, to imagine a world where that most fundamental division of humanity, gender, simply does not exist for roughly 4/5 of the month.
Just completely gone.
Right. A world locked in a brutal, unending ice age, where the climate is so hostile it dictates every action. A world where there is no war.
Which, on the surface, sounds like a beautiful utopia.
Right. But instead of war, there is plenty of political backstabbing, espionage, and an incredibly complex, labyrinthine web of pride and shadows.
It is the absolute definition of a paradigm shift. And exploring that shift is our mission today.
Yeah, we've got a lot to cover.
We really do. We are looking at an incredible stack of sources centered on Ursula K. Le Guin's groundbreaking science fiction masterpiece, The Left Hand of Darkness.
And we are not just looking at the novel itself, right?
No, not at all. We are pulling from a deeply insightful introduction by David Mitchell, Le Guin's own fascinating author's note from 1976, a really thought-provoking afterword by Charlie Jane Anders.
Oh, I loved that afterword.
It's so good. And we're even looking at the intensely detailed appendices on Gathenian timekeeping and mythology.
So we are going to explore this profound thought experiment from every possible angle in this deep dive.
We want to unpack how biology fundamentally shapes society, culture, and politics.
Yeah, and we're going to look at the psychological reality of this frozen world. And ultimately, try to understand how two completely alien minds can cross a literal and figurative wasteland to find connection.
Because beneath the ice and the alien politics, this is really a story about the agonizing, beautiful process of truly understanding another human being.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we even set foot on the physical ice of the planet Gethin, we have to look at the blueprint.
We do. We have to understand the specific lens through which Le Guin is asking you, the listener, to view this entire world.
Because in her author's note, she makes a very bold, almost counterintuitive claim about what science fiction actually is.
She completely upends how a lot of people approach the genre.
Yeah, she really does.
I mean, many people assume science fiction is what she calls extrapolative.
Right, like predicting the future.
Exactly. They think it is the business of predicting the future. The classic formula is that a sci-fi writer looks at a current trend, purifies it, intensifies it, and says, if this goes on, this is what our world will become in 100 years.
I always think of that like a laboratory experiment gone wrong.
How so?
Well, you take a food additive, feed massive unnatural doses of it to mice to see if it causes cancer, and then point to the tumor and say, look, this is our dystopian future.
That's a great analogy.
It is taking one facet of society and turning the dial up to 11.
And Le Guin explicitly rejects that methodology for this work.
She really does.
She argues that almost anything carried to its logical extreme becomes depressing, if not carcinogenic. She states flatly that this book is not extrapolative. Instead, she argues that science fiction is descriptive.
Descriptive, meaning it's a thought experiment used to describe our present psychological reality.
Exactly. And she drops this famous, brilliant paradox where she says that prediction is the business of prophets, clairvoyants, and futurologists. But a novelist's business is lying.
A novelist is a liar who tells the truth.
Yes.
That concept blew my mind when I read the note. She says they invent people who never existed, places that will never be, and events that never occurred.
Right. They spend a third of their life sleeping and another third telling these elaborate lies.
And then they present it to you and say, there, that's the truth.
And it works. We read a novel, and as she points out, we are temporarily insane. We genuinely believe in the struggles of people who aren't there.
That temporary insanity is the vehicle for a deeper truth.
Because fiction is a metaphor. The future in fiction is a metaphor.
So when she writes about an androgynous society set in the ecumenical year 1490 to 97, she isn't predicting that in a millennium we will all be androgynous.
Right. Nor is she prescribing that we should be.
No, she is suggesting that if you look at us at certain odd times of day in certain weathers, we already are.
She's describing our current human condition through the stark, contrasting metaphor of this alien world.
So we have this incredible metaphorical setup. Let's look at the mechanism that gets us into this world.
Let's do it.
We are introduced to our narrator, Genly A.
Genly A, yes.
He is an envoy, specifically the first mobile, from an organization called the Ecumen.
And from the sources, the Ecumen seems to be this massive network of 83 habitable planets.
Including Terra, which is Earth.
Exactly.
And Genly's job is to drop onto this freezing planet, Gethin, known to offworlders simply as Winter, and invite them to join this galactic trade and communication coalition.
And this is where Le Guin immediately subverts typical sci-fi trope.
Oh, totally.
David Mitchell points this out beautifully in his introduction. Genly AI is no Luke Skywalker.
No, definitely not.
He is no Star Trek captain with a heavily armed starship orbiting above, ready to beam him up or vaporize his enemies if things get rough.
He is entirely alone.
Completely isolated.
And this is where I have to push back on the Ecumen's entire strategy.
Okay, let's hear it.
I mean, Genly is a single, unarmed man in his late 20s. He drops into what is essentially a medieval court, and the only proof he has that he's from space is a device called an Ansible.
Right, which is basically a faster-than-light smartphone.
Yeah. Why send just one guy? It seems absurdly dangerous. You're asking for him to be assassinated, ignored, or thrown in a dungeon. Isn't that practically guaranteeing the failure of the mission?
It absolutely seems counterintuitive if you are thinking in terms of conquest, coercion, or even standard Earth diplomacy.
Which I guess I am.
But that reveals the genius of the Ecumen's approach. The Ecumen is not an empire.
Right, Genly explains that.
He says it is not a political body that enforces laws. It is a coordinator, a clearinghouse for trade and knowledge.
Okay.
They understand that the nature of an introduction dictates the entire future of the relationship. If you send a fleet of ships, it's an invasion, regardless of your peaceful intentions.
Right, the optics are terrible.
And if you send a team of diplomats, it forms an enclave. They talk to each other, they rely on each other, and they remain the other.
Ah, so a team becomes an isolated bubble. They never actually have to integrate.
Exactly. But if you send one person...
That person is incredibly vulnerable. They are a guest or a victim.
Precisely. One person cannot change a world by force. They pose no physical threat to a global power structure. Therefore, they have to be dealt with on a human level.
That makes a lot of sense.
One person must listen, adapt, and form personal, individual relationships to survive. Genly notes that the relationship he finally makes is not impersonal. It's not we and they, or I and it. It is I and thou.
I and thou.
He describes the Ecumen not as a body politic, but as a body mystic. They proceed by subtle, slow, evolutionary ways. They are essentially banking on the power of individual human trust.
A body mystic. It completely reframes the typical space opera narrative of bringing civilization to the savages.
It really does.
But Genly needs that trust desperately because the planet Gethin is utterly unforgiving.
Unforgiving is an understatement.
Let's talk about the physical reality of winter, because the environment is practically the main antagonist of the story.
It's everywhere.
It is a harsh, glacially locked planet. It is an unending ice age.
And the world building here is staggering. David Mitchell notes that Le Guin created her worlds with an anthropologist's eye.
Which makes sense, given her father was a famous anthropologist.
Exactly. Gethin is replete with persuasive, survival-driven details. The weather is relentless.
Yeah.
Because it's an ice age, the ecosystem is severely limited. There are no large meat animals, no horses, no cows.
So no stakes, no riding into battle.
Right, and there are no mammalian products like milk or cheese. The population survives on a very low-grade diet of fish, nuts, and grain pastes.
That sounds miserable.
It gets worse. They have to eat 4 solid meals a day just to keep their internal biological furnaces burning in the sub-freezing temperatures.
Wow. I was reading the very first chapter where Genly is attending a parade in Ring.
The capital city of the nation of Karhide.
Yeah. And the atmosphere felt so incredibly dark and heavy. It's a storm-beaten city of stone. The king, King Argiven, is sealing the keystone of a new arch over a river.
Right.
And Genly notices that the cement the king is using is this odd pinkish color. What was up with that pink cement? It felt like such a sinister detail to drop right at the beginning.
It is a brilliant piece of environmental storytelling. Genly asks the person standing next to him about that pink mortar.
And that person happens to be the prime minister, right?
Yes, a figure named Estraven. And Estraven just casually explains that very long ago, a keystone was always set in with a mortar of ground, human bones mixed with human blood. The belief was that without the blood bond, the arch would fall. He then adds, almost as a polite afterthought, "We use the blood of animals these days."
That is horrifying, but it tells you immediately exactly what kind of society Genly is dealing with.
It sets the tone perfectly.
This is a culture that values the collective structure, the arch, over individual life. Their past is steeped in a kind of raw, brutal violence that was probably deemed necessary for survival on the ice.
Absolutely.
And the fact that the prime minister just casually drops that historical trivia while sweating in heavy ceremonial furs, it's a huge culture clash.
And that conversation is our introduction to Therum Harthrem and Erestraven. He's the king's ear, arguably the most powerful man in Karhide.
Right.
Genly observes him, noting his dark, ironic, powerful presence.
Ah.
But because Genly is operating from his Terran perspective, he immediately misjudges Estraven.
He does.
He finds him specious and adroit. He feels a sense of falseness radiating from him.
And that misjudgment is the core tension of the entire book. Genly is fundamentally incapable at this early point of truly seeing Estraven.
He really is.
He assumes Estraven is a standard, duplicitous Earth politician. But the reason he misjudges him so badly brings us to the most defining feature of Gethin.
Biology.
Yes, even more than the ice, the biology is what truly alienates Genly. This is the core of Le Guin's thought experiment.
What happens to human society if gender is not fixed, but serially mutable?
Exactly. To understand Genly's confusion, we have to delve into the actual mechanics of the Khmer phenomena.
Right, the sources provide fascinating field notes from Ongtot Ulpong.
The investigator who actually preceded Genly to the planet.
Yes, Ulpong breaks down the physiology. The Gethinian lunar cycle is 26 days. For roughly 24 of those days, a period they call summer, Gethinians are entirely androgynous.
Totally neutral.
Right. They are biologically neuter, they have no sexual drive, no active reproductive organs, and no gendered hormones.
I tried to think of an analogy for this, and the closest I could come up with is a hive of worker bees.
Okay, I can see that.
For 90% of the time, they are just workers. No he, no she. Just people doing their jobs, running the government, hauling freight across the ice, building blood arches.
Right.
Their entire society functions without sex or gender as a motivating factor.
That is a very apt comparison.
Yeah.
But then comes the disruption.
The remaining 2 days.
Yes. For roughly 2 days of that cycle, they enter a phase called Khmer. It is an intense, biologically mandated estrus.
Like a heat cycle.
Exactly. In the first phase of Khmer, an individual remains androgynous but becomes highly sexually charged. If they find a partner who is also in Khmer, their hormonal secretions mutually stimulate each other.
Okay, and this is where it gets wild.
Right. And here is the mechanism that shatters the binary. Until that interaction occurs, the individual's gender is completely undetermined.
Wait, so how does the cycle transformation actually work? Who becomes what?
It is entirely contextual and, from the individual's perspective, somewhat random. One partner will develop male sexual organs and hormonal dominance, and the other will physically alter to develop female traits and reproductive capacity.
Just based on chemical interaction?
Yes. And once the cycle ends, they revert to their androgynous state.
That is staggering to think about. You could be male in one cycle and female in the next.
Absolutely.
You could sire a child 1 month, and a year later you could bear a child yourself. The novel has that famous, mind-bending line that David Mitchell highlights in his intro. The king was pregnant.
It's such an iconic line.
That single sentence completely short-circuits our historical understanding of monarchy, power, and biology.
It has to. Because if anyone can get pregnant, the burden, the risk, and the joy of reproduction are distributed equally across the entire population.
Wow, yeah.
There is absolutely no biological basis for a patriarchy or a matriarchy. You cannot oppress a specific gender if everyone is constantly shifting between them and spending most of their time as neither.
Ongtot Upong's notes lay out the practical day-to-day consequences of this reality, and they are profound. First of all, there is no rape on Gethin.
Right, it is biologically impossible.
because coitus can only be performed by mutual invitation and consent during Kemmer. During summer, the physical capacity simply isn't there. Apom notes dryly that seduction would have to be awfully well-timed.
Furthermore, there is no permanent division of humanity into strong and weak halves, protective and protected, dominant and submissive, owner and chattel.
The whole power dynamic is just erased.
Exactly. The entire society, from the highest government levels to the lowest laborers, makes room for Kemmer. Everyone gets time off when their cycle hits.
Yep, it's a given.
Yes, it is treated as an undeniable biological imperative. There are public Kemmer houses in every town.
Which really makes you wonder, how did a human population evolve this way? Was it a natural adaptation to the extreme cold?
Well, the sources actually suggest something much darker. Upham theorizes that Gethenians did not evolve this way naturally. They were likely an ancient genetic experiment conducted by the original Hainish colonizers hundreds of thousands of years ago.
That is a chilling thought. Treating millions of human lives, an entire planetary population, as experimental subjects.
It really is.
What could they possibly be testing?
Upham guesses that perhaps the experimenters wanted to see if human beings lacking continuous sexual potentiality would remain intelligent and capable of complex culture.
It's just a sociological test.
Or more practically, considering the brutal climate, perhaps they wanted to see if removing the constant drive, conflict, and friction of continuous sexuality would allow the species to conserve precious energy and survive better in an ice age.
Ah, energy conservation.
Right. By condensing reproduction into a highly efficient 2-day window, they freed up massive amounts of societal energy for sheer survival.
It clearly worked, because they survived. But the tragedy of the narrative is that Genly A, our highly trained Terran envoy, just cannot wrap his head around it.
No, he struggles immensely.
And this brings up a really fascinating point raised by Charlie Jane Anders in her Afterword. She argues that Genly AI is an incredibly flawed, unreliable narrator.
He is.
Honestly, looking closely at his inner monologue, he is a bit of a misogynist.
He absolutely is, and it is crucial to understand that Le Guin wrote him this way intentionally.
She wanted him to be flawed.
Genly is a product of Earth. He is a product of our binary world. He cannot look at a Gethenian and just see a human being. His brain desperately tries to force them into his comfortable categories of man or woman.
Yeah, you can see him constantly struggling with pronouns and perceptions.
And whenever he sees traits he culturally associates with femininity, like subtlety, emotional expression, or indirect communication, he judges them incredibly harshly.
Anders brings receipts for this. Early on, Genly thinks Estraven's performance at a dinner table is womanly. All charm and tact and lack of substance.
Yeah.
Right, and when King Argovin acts paranoid and erratic, Genly describes him as having a shrill laugh, which Anders rightly notes is a highly loaded word typically used to dismiss women who speak up or show emotion.
Oh, definitely.
Even his poor landlady is mocked in his inner monologue for her prying in her, quote, fat ass.
Yeah.
Genly is totally trapped in his 1960s Earth mindset.
He is a prisoner of his own gender essentialism.
Yeah.
There is a painful conversation later where he literally tells Estraven that in the Ecomen, women seldom seem to become mathematicians or abstract thinkers. Though he generously adds, but it isn't that they're stupid.
It is wince-inducing.
It really is.
Okay.
But it serves a vital narrative and thematic purpose. It makes it generally terrible at his job.
Because he can't read the room.
Exactly. He fails to trust Estraven precisely because he misreads Estraven's complex, nuanced political maneuvering as effeminate deviousness. He equates masculinity with straightforward honesty and femininity with deception.
And what's brilliant is that the Gethenians look at Genly and they don't see a swaggering, heroic male protagonist.
Not at all.
To them, he is a biological nightmare. Because he is always capable of sex, they view him as being in a state of permanent, unending Kemmer.
Imagine how horrifying that must seem to them.
King Argovin flat out calls it a society of perverts when Genly tries to explain that everyone on Earth is like him. To the Gethenians, Genly is a freak, an animal driven by constant, uncontrolled urges.
And this is how Le Guin's thought experiment catches the reader. She doesn't just present a utopian, genderless society from an objective distance.
She forces us to experience it through the eyes of someone who shares our prejudices, our binary lens.
Yes, and then she slowly, methodically dismantles those prejudices. We have to watch Genly fail over and over because his binary lens fundamentally distorts the reality of Gathenian politics.
If he can't even understand them biologically, how does he handle the politics? Because the political landscape of this planet is a
A
minefield.
total minefield.
The story focuses on the two major nations on the great continent of Gethin, Karhide and Orgarin. And they are complete opposites in how they function.
Karhide, where Genly begins his mission, is described by Estraven not as a cohesive nation, but as a family quarrel.
A family quarrel, I love that.
It is a highly decentralized, chaotic, almost feudal society. It's ruled by King Argaven XV, who is widely acknowledged by his own subjects to be mad. He's paranoid, deeply fearful, and unpredictable.
And the social glue that holds this chaotic family quarrel together is a concept called Shifgrethor. The outline defines it as an untranslatable word dealing with prestige, face, place, and the pride relationship.
Right.
But how does that actually work in practice?
Think of it like an incredibly high-context corporate culture where no one ever gives a direct order or a direct refusal.
Right.
But everyone knows exactly where they stand based on microscopic social cues.
Oh, wow. That sounds exhausting.
Shifgrethor is the art of indirect communication. It's about saving face, both yours and your opponent's. You never push someone into a corner where they have to say no directly because that causes a loss of Shifgrethor for both of you. It is a dance of shadows and implications.
And Genly, being a direct, task-oriented Terran, is terrible at it.
Just the worst.
He wants a straight answer. Will you join the Ekumen, yes or no? And Karhiders find that bluntness offensive and childish. So Genly constantly feels like he's being lied to, when in reality, they're just communicating in a register he refuses to learn.
Now contrast Karhide's shadowy, indirect feudalism with their neighbor to the west, Orgarin.
Okay, let's look at Orgarin.
When Genly eventually encounters Orgaran, it seems infinitely more familiar and advanced to his Terran sensibilities. It is a unified, logical, highly organized nation-state.
Very Earth-like.
Yes. They have a massive bureaucracy governed by a council called the Commensals of the 33. They have electric trucks, radios, paved roads, and a facade of open trade and rational governance.
But there is a massive anomaly in this world, regardless of whether you are in Karhide or Orgarin.
What's that?
They have never had a war. Ever.
Right. It is a remarkable sociological observation by Genly. It's not that they are peaceful. They have bitter quarrels, murders, vendettas, and political assassinations. Individual and clan violence is common.
So they aren't saints.
No, not at all. But they entirely lack the capacity and the organizational desire to mobilize masses of people for organized warfare.
Why? Is it the lack of gender? Does removing the constant influx of testosterone prevent mass violence?
Genly theorizes exactly that perhaps they lack the male aggressive drive required for war.
But Apong had a different theory, right?
Yes, Apong's notes suggest a more environmental reason. The climate is so devastatingly harsh that they simply cannot afford to waste energy fighting each other.
Ah, back to energy conservation.
Right. When it takes all of your society's caloric output just to keep from freezing to death, you don't have the surplus resources to march an army across a glacier. The weather is the common enemy.
But that fragile peace is starting to fracture. There is a border dispute over a piece of land called the Sinoth Valley. And for the first time in Gethinian history, something new and toxic is brewing. Patriotism.
It's a dangerous new concept for them.
Esther then has this chilling, incredibly prescient conversation with Genly, where he defines patriotism not as the love of one's homeland, but as fear. He says its expressions are political, not poetical. Hate, rivalry, aggression, it grows in us, that fear.
Estraven is a visionary. He recognizes that Karhide, driven by the king's paranoia regarding the Sinoth Valley, is on the brink of emulating Orgaran's nation-state model.
And a unified nation-state has the bureaucratic capacity to organize a war.
Exactly. So Estraven makes a desperate, incredibly risky political maneuver. To defuse the tension, he quietly helps Karhidish farmers in the disputed valley move back across the old border.
He just gives it up.
Yes. He is essentially trying to cede the worthless, frozen land to Orgaran to remove the catalyst for the conflict.
He does it to save lives. He does it to prevent the concept of war from being born on his planet.
Which is incredibly noble.
But in Karhide, giving up land without a fight is a massive public loss of Shifgrethor. It looks like cowardice or worse, treason.
It's political suicide.
And King Argaven's new favorite, a ruthless cousin named Tybe, uses this exact maneuver to poison the king's mind, resulting in Estraven being declared a traitor and exiled under pain of death.
And here is where Genly's total misunderstanding of Shift-Grethor and his biological prejudices lead to tragedy.
Because Genly completely misses the point.
Entirely. Estraven had been Genly's only real supporter. He was the only one trying to convince the Mad King to accept the Ekumen's alliance.
Right.
But when Estraven is exiled, Genly feels personally betrayed. He assumes Estraven was just using the envoy in a petty power game and lost.
He thinks Estraven was just playing politics.
Yes. He completely fails to realize that Estraven sacrificed his entire life, his career, and his homeland to prevent a war that would have ruined any chance of the Ekumen succeeding.
So, what does this all mean for Genly? He feels abandoned in Karhide. His mission is stalling, so he decides to pack up and cross the border into Orgarin.
And he walks blindly into a trap.
A huge trap.
Because Genly is a Terran, he is drawn to Orgarin's surface-level logic. The bureaucracy, the wide streets, the apparent efficiency it feels like Earth to him.
Is comfortable.
Right. He is wooed by an Orgoda political faction called the Open Trade Party, led by commensals, who seem very interested in his starship and the technology it could bring.
But Genly fails to navigate the shadow politics of Orgarin.
How does a modern, seemingly logical society justify a trap like that?
Yeah, how do they get away with it?
Because beneath the surface of Orgarin's efficiency is a ruthless, quasi-totalitarian state. They maintain order through a secret police force known as the SARF.
That's a SARF.
In Karhide, the king might scream at you and exile you, but it's done in public and he lets you walk out. In Orgarin, the SARF operate entirely in the dark. The ruling faction realizes that acknowledging Genly as a true alien envoy would upset their power dynamics. They don't want his starship. They want to maintain their control through isolation and fear.
So what do?
So one night, the SARF simply arrests Genly. There is no trial, no public announcement. They vanish him.
They throw him into the back of a freezing truck with a group of other political prisoners and ship him to a voluntary farm in the remote frozen north, the Pulafin farm.
Voluntary farm.
And the term voluntary farm is such a chilling piece of Orwellian doublespeak. It is a brutal, dehumanizing labor camp where dissidents are slowly worked and starved to death in the cold.
It really highlights the danger of their system.
It is a stark depiction of how a society that prizes collective efficiency over individual humanity can easily slide into totalitarianism.
And to truly understand how these two nations arrived at such different expressions of power, Karhide's chaotic freedom versus Orgarin's orderly oppression, we have to look at their philosophical underpinnings.
The belief systems.
Yes, the religions, or the philosophical disciplines of Gethin, are the psychological source code for their politics.
Let's start with Karhide. They practice a discipline called the Handara, and it is absolutely fascinating.
It's very unique.
It is an anarchic, passive religion. There is no hierarchy, no pope, no strict dogma. Their entire worldview is built around a concept called Nusuth. It translates roughly to no matter or not important. It reminds me a bit of Taoism or extreme Stoicism. It is a philosophy of non-interference, of embracing the dark, the unproven, and the unknown.
Yes, the Handara values inaction over action. They believe that action should only be taken when it's absolutely necessary, like a rock falling only when gravity demands it.
I like that analogy.
And the most dramatic, almost supernatural manifestation of the Handara is their practice of foretelling. Because the Handara possess a genuine, documented ability to accurately predict the future.
Which is crazy. Genly actually visits a Handara retreat, the other horde fastness, to witness this. And the mechanics of this foretelling are utterly terrifying.
They're intense.
He asks them a straightforward question. Will this world, Gethin, be a member of the Ekumen 5 years from now? To get the answer, a circle of 9 people forms.
Right.
This group includes a weaver named Fax, who acts as the focal point. But it also includes 2 zanies, who are clinical schizophrenics, and several celibates, one of whom is deliberately kept in the intensely frustrated, biologically painful state of Kemmer without a partner.
It is a psychological pressure cooker. They are harnessing extreme human states.
Yeah, weaponizing it almost.
They use the immense, violently suppressed sexual tension of the Kemmerer, combined with the distorted time perception and chaotic mental energy of the Zanies, as a kind of psychic battery. Fax, the weaver, draws all this chaotic, empathetic, telepathic energy into a complex mental web. He holds it in a trance of total, agonizing concentration until the psychic strain literally breaks the pattern of linear time, allowing them to reach through and see the answer.
Genly, observing this, feels bombarded by telepathic hallucinations, a red and black seething of erotic rage and mental static. It's a horrific ordeal.
But it works. Fax, sweating and trembling in this agonizing vision of light and silver armor, screams out the answer.
Yes.
But what blew my mind was the philosophical takeaway. After surviving this harrowing experience, Genly asks Fax a very logical question.
What's that?
If you have this incredible, infallible power to see the future, why don't you use it to solve all your political problems? Why didn't the king ask them what to do about the Sinoth Valley dispute?
Fax's answer goes right to the heart of the Handara philosophy. He says they practice foretelling to exhibit the perfect uselessness of knowing the answer to the wrong question.
The perfect uselessness.
Fax explains that the unknown, the unproven, is the very foundation of life and action. If we knew everything for certain, if there was no darkness, there would be no reason to ever make a choice.
Because the choice is already made for you.
Exactly. He asks Genly what is the one absolute certain thing he knows about his own future. The answer, of course, is death. Knowing the end doesn't help you live the way. The Handara embrace the darkness of not knowing, because that darkness is where freedom lives. Okay, now contrast that completely with the religion of Orgaran, the Yomish cult. The sources give us excerpts from their texts, and it is a total inversion of the Handara.
Completely opposite.
The Yomish cult was actually founded by a Handar weaver named Mesha thousands of years ago. Mesha attempted a massive foretelling to answer the ultimate wrong question. What is the meaning of life?
And according to their lore, the sheer weight of that foretelling broke Mesha's mind. But in a unique way.
Wow.
He didn't just see the answer. He supposedly saw all of time at once.
Everything.
The Yomish believe that Mesha is the center of time. In his sight, there's no time past and no time to come. Everything just is, simultaneously. And because he sees everything, they believe everything exists purely in the light.
Their core tenet is, in the sight of Mesha, there is no darkness. They revere the light, they revere transparency, and they completely reject the shadow.
Right.
But this is where I get hung up. If the Yomish live entirely in the light, if they claim there are no secrets and no darkness, why is Orgaran the place of the secret police?
That's the paradox.
Why are they the ones operating the SARF, hiding people away in the dark of night in voluntary farms? It seems totally hypocritical.
It is hypocritical, but it is also a brilliant psychological insight by Guin regarding totalitarian states. Denying the shadow doesn't make it disappear. It just makes you blind to it.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Because Orgaran, officially, culturally, claims to be a society of total transparency and light, where everyone is a visible, contributing part of the collective whole. They literally cannot acknowledge their own darkness.
So they hide it from themselves.
Exactly. So their darkness is forced underground. It
Yeah.
becomes covert, institutionalized, and infinitely more dangerous. The Hanandora and Karhide accepts the shadow, and so they walk with it out in the open.
But the Yomish deny it, and so it rules them from behind the scenes.
Estraven summarizes it perfectly later. We need the shadows in order to walk. If you have no shadow, you have no depth. You are just a flat surface waiting to be controlled.
And that philosophical clash of light and dark becomes a literal matter of life and death for Genly. Because while he is rotting in the voluntary farm, dying of cold and malnutrition, Estraven, the exiled traitor, has secretly crossed into Orgaran.
He comes back for him.
He has tracked Genly down, and he orchestrates a daring, incredibly dangerous rescue. Estraven uses a specific Handara trance state called Doth, which grants a temporary hysterical burst of physical strength to break Genly out of the camp.
But they're still deep inside hostile territory.
Right.
To escape the SARF, they have to flee into the only place the secret police won't follow.
The Gobern Ice. It is a massive, unexplored, totally desolate northern glacier. They have to march hundreds of miles across it in the absolute dead of winter to bypass the border guards and get back into Karhide, where they can find a radio powerful enough to call Genly's starship down from orbit.
And this brings us to the emotional and narrative climax of the deep dive, the trek.
It's epic.
It is an 80-day journey across the ice cap that reads like Shackleton's expedition, but on an alien world. Charlie Jane Anders praises Le Guin's visceral details here. We feel the unrelenting grind of hauling a heavy sled through deep snow.
Every step feels heavy.
We feel the desperation of pitching a tent in sub-zero, screaming winds. We taste the ration paste called gitchy-mishy and experience the brief, bloody triumph of hunting a rare, rabbit-like creature called a pestry.
They're totally isolated in a white, frozen void.
And this harsh physical environment acts as a crucible. It finally strips away all the political artifice. There is no room for Shifgrethor when you are freezing to death.
You can't play games when you're just trying to survive.
Exactly. There is no room for envoy and traitor. They're reduced to pure survival, and in that mutual dependence, they are forced to confront each other simply as individuals.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the breakthrough isn't just physical, it's a profound mental and emotional connection. Genly, realizing that standard communication has failed them for months, decides to teach Estraven telepathy.
Right, mind speech.
His people call it mind speech. It is a form of communication that connects directly mind to mind, meaning it cannot be used to lie. But when Genly finally reaches into Estraven's mind and speaks to him telepathically for the first time, Estraven recoils in horror.
Because he hears the voice of his dead brother.
Yes, Eric. The sources weave this tragic backstory in through a hearth tale earlier in the book. Estraven and his brother Eric were deeply in love.
In Guthenian culture, siblings can vow cammering to each other, which is their equivalent of marriage, but they're strictly forbidden to maintain that vow once a child is conceived.
That's their taboo.
It is their culture's incest taboo. Estraven and Eric broke the vow, a child was conceived, and Eric, overwhelmed by despair over the cultural shame and the forced permanent separation, committed suicide.
And suicide is the ultimate taboo on Gethin. So Estraven has been carrying this immense, secret, shameful wound for years. And when Genly speaks in Eric's voice, it tears that wound wide open.
It's devastating.
It is a terrifying level of intimacy. But by speaking Estraven's true name, by communicating directly without the possibility of lies or shatters, the final barriers between them fall. The Shifgrethor is permanently gone. They finally see each other clearly.
It leads to the profound philosophical realization of the novel. Sitting in their tiny tent, surrounded by hundreds of miles of deadly ice, Genly takes his notebook and draws a symbol for Estraven to explain how he finally understands him.
The yin and yang.
He draws the yin and yang, he blacks in one half, leaves the other white, and explains the duality. Light, dark, fear, courage, cold, warmth, female, male. It is yourself theorem, both in one. A shadow on snow.
It perfectly connects back to the poem Estraven quoted earlier in the story. Light is the left hand of darkness, and darkness the right hand of light. Two are one, life and death, lying together like lovers in Kemmer.
Genly finally stops trying to force Estraven into a Terran box. He stops seeing him as a defective man or a deceptive woman. He sees him as a complete, integrated entity. A man-woman.
And this is where we return to David Mitchell's introduction. Mitchell calls Le Guin a chemist of the heart.
I love that phrase.
Me too. He points out that on the ice, Genly realizes that their love and their deep friendship are not built on finding common ground. It's not built on finding someone exactly like you. It is built entirely on the difference between them.
Mitchell quotes Genly's revelation. It was from the difference between us, not from the affinities and likenesses, but from the difference, that love came. And it was itself the bridge, the only bridge, across what divided us.
They cross the physical bridge of the Gobern ice and the emotional bridge of their absolute alienness. Against all odds, they survive, they make it off the glacier and reach the borders of Karhide.
It's a miracle they make it.
Genly is finally in a position to use an Ansible radio in a border town to call down his starship. The mission is within reach, but the journey demands a final, tragic toll.
Yes, it does. They are hiding in a small border town, exhausted but victorious. Genly has sent the signal. But Estraven, ever the political realist, knows that the game isn't over.
He knows how the king thinks.
Right. If he, an officially exiled traitor with a death sentence, is found standing next to the envoy when the starship arrives, King Argaven's paranoia will override everything. The Mad King will view the ship not as a peaceful alliance, but as an Orgata plot or a traitor's military coup.
It would ruin everything.
Estraven's continued presence compromises the entire mission he has just sacrificed everything to save.
So Estraven does the unthinkable. Without telling Genly, he leaves the safe house, he puts on his skis, and he deliberately skis right into the heavily armed border guards.
He knows exactly what he's doing.
He makes a performative attempt to cross back into Orgarain, knowing full well the Karhidish guards have strict orders to shoot him on sight. He intentionally commits suicide by cop.
And we must contextualize the heavy cultural weight of this act. We talked about the Getherin myth, the hearth tales of suicide. On Gethin, suicide is not just viewed as a personal tragedy, it is the ultimate moral crime. It is viewed as an absolute abdication of choice, a cowardly betrayal of life itself. A person who kills themselves is said to have no face among men, and their name is laid as a curse.
Which makes Estraven's sacrifice so overwhelmingly heartbreaking. Think about his life. He lived his entire life in the shadows, navigating the subtle nuances of Shifgrathor, trying to save his country from its own worst impulses.
He gave everything.
And to finally secure a future for his world, to bring humanity together and prevent the invention of war, he makes the ultimate sacrifice in the most stigmatized, shameful way possible in his culture. He embraces the ultimate darkness so his world can step into the light.
But his brutal political calculus works perfectly. The shock of Genly's miraculous survival, the undeniable proof of his journey across the ice, and the immediate tragic finality of Estraven's death forces the political hand.
There's no way around it now.
King Argivan is backed into a corner. The starship lands in Karhide. The governments of both nations are completely upended. Karhide and soon Orgarin will join the Akemen. Estraven won. The mission is a success.
But the personal cost is devastating. In the final chapter, after the ship arrives and the political dust settles, Genly travels back to Estraven's home domain in Kermland. He visits Estraven's aged father and his young son to bring them the journals Estraven kept during his exile and their impossible ice journey.
It is a tense, incredibly quiet scene. The young son is angry, noting bitterly that in the capital city, they still refer to his father as Estraven the traitor.
And Genly, trying to offer comfort, says, "The king will recant. Sturum was no traitor. What does it matter what fools call him?"
And the old father, sitting by the hearth, just looks at Genly and says 2 words. It matters.
I really had to stop and sit with that line. What does he mean? Why does it matter what ignorant fools call him if Genly and the family know the truth of his heroism?
Because truth, in a vacuum, isn't enough to heal a world. The old man is acknowledging that history is written by the living, and political spin has real, lasting consequences on a family's honor.
That's very true.
But more profoundly, he is asserting that Estraven's legacy shouldn't be defined by the shifting, arbitrary titles of traitor or hero bestowed by mad kings. It matters means the truth matters.
The truth.
The undeniable reality of what Estraven accomplished, bridging the gap between alien worlds, crossing the impossible ice, showing that love can exist across vast differences, that is the true weight of his life. It matters that the story is told correctly.
It matters that the journals exist to prove his journey.
Yes. It matters that Genly remembers him as a friend, not just a political pawn. The truth must be spoken, or the sacrifice is lost.
Wow. We have unpacked a massive amount of material today. We started with a brilliant, disorienting thought experiment about a genderless society, a world of freezing ice and political shadows.
We really covered a lot of ground.
And we watched that experiment unfold into this profound, agonizingly beautiful exploration of communication, the nature of duality, and the radical idea that true love and understanding are built not on finding sameness, but on embracing the vast alien differences between us.
It is a masterpiece of science fiction. It perfectly executes Le Guin's claim, using the lie of a fictional alien world to tell a piercing truth about our own human psychology, our own deep-seated fears of the other, and our own desperate need for authentic connection.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought. It comes from the very end of the source material, buried in the appendices explaining the Gethenian calendar.
Yes, the calendar is fascinating. On Gethin, years are not numbered sequentially from some distant founding event in the past, the way we use BC and AD or BCE and CE.
Right.
Instead, the base year is always the current year. It is always year 1. Every New Year's Day, the year that just passed becomes one ago, and the year ahead becomes one to come. As the text beautifully states, it's always the year 1 here.
Think about the psychological impact of that. Think about how incredibly heavy the past is for us on Earth, how we drag our histories, our national grievances, our generational traumas, and our old identities behind us like a massive sled on the ice.
It weighs us down.
We define ourselves by what happened hundreds or thousands of years ago.
I want to challenge you to consider how your life, your relationships, and your understanding of truth might change if you stopped living under the weight of a linear past.
Yeah, what if you treated today, right now, this very moment, as year 1?
What if the past was only counted backward from now and the future only counted forward from now? If the present moment was the center of your timeline, how would that alter the choices you make today?
What an incredible question to ponder. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the unknown. Remember, while we may open a book to escape into an alien world of ice and shadow, we ultimately find our own true faces reflected in the pages. We'll catch you next time.